So you know how when you buy a car, you care about the engine? Well, some of us do. Well, when you build an application, you care about the large language model inside it if it's an AI application. And these days, the cool thing is that LLMs continue to get better under the hood, and so your application can improve quietly in the background. One of the reasons why Cursor has taken off is because LLMs underneath have gotten substantially better in the last few months in some really interesting ways. I want to call out a few highlights. Number one is file search from OpenAI. Do you recall, like a year plus ago, when there was a scandal because Air Canada had an LLM? Well, it was actually an NLP model. That's a different detail. But they had a chatbot hallucinate a bereavement policy that didn't exist, and it resulted in a lawsuit. That kind of hallucination would not be practical to do today if you set up your LLM correctly. And OpenAI's recent file search update makes that even harder. So file search adds the ability to bring in documents from outside into embeddings, which are sort of vectorized representations of the real world. And then you can use both vector and keyword search to go and retrieve relevant content from that vectorized embedding to answer user queries. It's a fancy way of saying if you have, for instance, an HR policy on something, you can add it in directly into OpenAI, super easy. It will vectorize it and it will come back and you can get responses from it. Now, people have been doing this for a while with a larger toolchain approach with Llama Index, for example. But this makes it super easy to do it all within OpenAI's ecosystem, which is, of course, what they want. I also want to call out that Claude, this is switching topics a bit, right? We talked about OpenAI. They've got their file update. Another one that came by is Claude. Claude is increasing the token count in their API calls to 8,192. They're doubling it. So it's over 8,000 tokens versus about 4,000 tokens previously. This may not seem like a ton, and Claude, like most large language models, doesn't like to use that token space if it can avoid it. So you kind of have to push it. But it's worth calling out that their max token count just doubled. And one of the reasons that matters is if you're doing something like writing code, say, and you need a larger code piece, well, you now have double the room. And so when people talk about what LLMs are good at, where they're weak, some of this has to do with underlying capabilities that can change over time. And so I think one of the things that's been interesting to observe is that the doubling of the Claude Sonnet max output token limit has coincided with the recent rise in interest in Cursor. Cursor has been out for a little bit, but Cursor has been depending on the capabilities of LLMs underneath. And it's almost like the LLMs underneath had to get good enough for people to be able to write really strong code with minimal effort, or at least passable code for small front-end apps with minimal effort, depending on who you ask, right? Like there are definitely people who are skeptical on the ability of Cursor plus Claude Sonnet to write a complex application. I have not yet seen one, so we will see. But regardless, it is remarkable to be able to sit down, put in an outline, get a working app out. And I suspect that there's a connection between the updates in Claude over the summer and the tip up in usage in Cursor. And I know that there's some other stuff. There's sort of, when OpenAI's founder tweets about you, like you're going to have a little bit of a spike in interest. But it wouldn't have lasted if people couldn't build stuff with it. And that underlying capability is driven by the LLM. And so the next time you think about what you can build, I want you to think about what you are building in the direction of increasing LLM capability over time. What's going to work better in 6 months or in a year because the large language models underneath are going to get even better. There you go. That's my thought. What are you doing with file generation? What are you doing with the extra Claude tokens?